Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Bilal Assaili. I'm a partner at the law firm of Assaili & Brown, and I am here with Ms. Lori Ford, who is a resident of Hawaii and also the Republican candidate for the 18th Hawaii State House District seat. We are here today to discuss what is happening with regard to Ms. Ford and her legal status in Hawaii. As we all know, 2020 has been a challenging year for our nation, as well as the state of Hawaii. Ms. Ford made the decision this year to seek state office in the State House in her hometown. She did this to, of course, better her community and the quality of life for all Hawaiians. In order to run for office, Ms. Ford was required to appear in person at the Office of Elections by June 2nd, 2020. During this time, Ms. Ford was actually traveling in California to visit family and had decided to stay close to family during the pandemic in California. But in order to be eligible to run for office, she was required to fly back, pull papers, get signatures, and return them to the Office of Elections. Ms. Ford flew back to Hawaii around May 26th of this year to exercise her civil right to run for state office. She pulled her candidacy papers on the 26th and returned the required signatures the very next day on the 27th. After submitting her papers, Ms. Ford promptly flew back to California to be with her family and to wait out the restrictions on travel and quarantining imposed by the governor of Hawaii. After returning to California, Ms. Ford was surprised to receive a phone call from a special agent with the Hawaii Attorney General's office. The special agent advised Ms. Ford that she had violated the governor's 14-day quarantine order by flying back and pulling papers, and requested that she immediately fly back to Hawaii so that she would be arrested and taken to jail. Ms. Ford, of course, was shocked by the aggressiveness of the Attorney General's office and contacted my law firm for representation. I, in turn, contacted the special agent as well as a Deputy Attorney General with the Hawaii Attorney General's office and confirmed with them that Ms. Ford was, in fact, under investigation for violating the quarantine order, and they did intend to arrest her and book her in jail upon her return to Hawaii. I inquired as to why it was necessary to arrest her and take her to jail as opposed to citing her for a violation, which is the standard procedure for nonviolent minor offenses, but I was not provided a response. The disproportionate use of force towards Ms. Ford is both perplexing and legally troubling, especially since at this time, the state of Hawaii is currently releasing inmates from confinement into the general population right now in Hawaii. They do not have to arrest and book Ms. Ford in jail, which would potentially expose her to a COVID infection. Ms. Ford is not a criminal. She has no criminal history and is in all respects an upstanding member of her community. The governor's quarantine order and the Attorney General's position is problematic. Ms. Ford does have the right to take reasonable steps to run for office, including pulling papers. The quarantine order, we believe, as applied to Ms. Ford, is unconstitutional. The order must permit citizens to engage in critical civil rights, such as running for office. As the U.S. Attorney General has recently stated in a statement of interest that was filed with the District Court of Hawaii, the DOJ acknowledged that while Hawaii does have an interest in promoting the best possible public health strategies to combat the virus, those interests do not justify government restrictions that violate the Constitution. We also question the timing and the motivation for the enforcement of the governor's order. Ms. Ford is running as a Republican in a heavily Democrat state. We have serious concerns that the Attorney General is insisting on arresting and jailing Ms. Ford, primarily out of improper political motivations as opposed to any legitimate law enforcement need. And I'm going to have Ms. Ford say a few words about how This decision to seek her arrest has impacted her personally and her ability to campaign and seek office in Hawaii, and how she has now been effectively made into a political refugee of her own home state of Hawaii. So Ms. Ford, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bilal. Aloha, my name is Lori Ford, and I am proud to be the Republican candidate for Hawaii State House District 18, which encompasses the areas of Ainahaina, Niu Valley, Hahioni, Kulia'o, and Hawaii Kai. The reason we are here today, as my attorney has already highlighted, is that I am being threatened with an walk of shame, arrest, for violating a quarantine when I filed my candidate papers just a few days before the candidate deadline. I am not a threat to society. If anything, I am a contributing member of our society, especially in Hawaii and in my district. First and foremost, I want to thank all those that have supported my campaign, that voted for me in the August 8th primary election. I got the most number of votes for a Republican contesting an incumbent, the most number for a Republican in the state legislature. So that says a lot. I mean, with my attorney has already highlighted the reasons of why this is just far-reaching, but our community deserves a voice that is willing to stand up, that has the courage to stand up. For far too long, the status quo of our supermajority Democratic legislature has really turned away from the people. So the threat of my arrest impacts not only my campaign, but on a personal level, my family. We were stranded on the mainland when the first emergency order was implemented. We were not able to immediately come back when my kids, my husband and I were traveling over spring break. And then my kids, my kids are my reason why I decided to run for office. And there are so many fellow parents that I speak with that are just dissatisfied and really urged and encouraged me to run for public office. I have long been a member of my community. I have served behind the scenes of politics for a lot of key Republican elected officials, but 2020 is different. With my experience since the early 2000s, almost 2 decades working behind the scenes, my voice matters. My voice as a mom, my voice as a longtime resident of House District 18, but also for the future of our keiki. They are, our children, our keiki, are the future leaders of Hawaii, and we need to equip them and give them an environment where they can thrive. And unfortunately, the status quo is just not measuring up, especially in 2020. So today I am speaking out along with the support of the voters, the constituents, my family, my friends, as well as my legal team, to tell the public what is happening. Again, I am not a threat to society. I pay my taxes on time. I'm a mother. However, I cannot be there with my children. My daughter's first day of school was yesterday, and I cannot be there. My son, who is a senior at Kalani High School, both my children attend public school in Hawaii. I cannot be there for my children. My daughter is 13, and this is a critical time where a girl needs her mother. Now, without the threat of arrest, I cannot be there for my children. And so with that, I just wanted to speak up and be the voice. I recently read in the news that even a teacher who on a teacher's salary was arrested. And, is this what our state is coming to arrest non-threatening individuals, to make them do a walk of shame, to place the fear into the people. So with that, thank you, mahalo, and aloha.
And we'd be happy to take some questions, but I just wanted to be clear that Ms. Ford is still in California. She's not been able to return to Hawaii because of the threat of arrest. Her children are currently in Hawaii. They were slated to start school there, and they did have to fly back, and Ms. Ford is now currently separated from her family. So this is having a real impact on her and her family life. And I just want to point out that today is the 100-year anniversary of the women's suffrage movement. And it is really ironic that when we should be celebrating women's right to vote, as well as to seek office, that the governor and the attorney general of Hawaii are threatening people like Ms. Ford with arrest if they dare to come back and campaign in person. I just find that really remarkable and noteworthy. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions. Okay, I see a question pop up on the screen here. It says, Lori, were you not aware of the quarantine order when you went to pull your papers in March? And actually, I'll answer the question because since this is an open criminal investigation, I've instructed her not to comment about the comments, not to comment about the facts of her case, since this is still an open investigation. I will say that just as a slight correction, she pulled her papers in June. So obviously she was aware of it, and it's the reason she wasn't able to return to Hawaii yet, is she stayed on the mainland during spring break because this order had gone into effect while she was out of the state. When she made the decision to run for office, she had no choice but to fly back and pull her papers in person. So she really didn't have a choice, and the order should have allowed an exception for people exercising their civil rights to want to run for office and exercise those civil rights. It's not like she went back for vacation or to sit on the beach. She went there, pulled her papers, and promptly left. So this wasn't a flagrant violation of the order. And like I said, and as the Attorney General has stated, the governor certainly has the right to impose reasonable restrictions to deal with the COVID pandemic, but those restrictions have to be balanced and they cannot violate fundamental constitutional rights. And again, whether or not she violated the order, our concern is the proportionality of force and the manner in which they are enforcing the governor's order. Like I said, most misdemeanors are never arrested or brought to jail. They have to be, they are usually cited and provided a court date. And we've requested that, but they have not agreed to do that. They're insisting on her flying back to be arrested and hauled off to jail. I see a second question here. Did Ms. Ford attempt to obtain an exemption from the quarantine order to pull her papers? Did she do anything else to violate the quarantine at the time? So I will just answer that question by saying that she did not affirmatively seek an exemption. However, she did not believe that traveling there strictly for the purpose of pulling papers and promptly leaving would be considered a violation. And she took precautions. She has been tested before and since to make sure she does not have COVID. And like I said, the only way she could have pulled papers was to go in person to the Office of Elections. I've asked to repeat the time of travel. So the deadline to pull papers was June 2nd, 2020. She made a last minute decision to run for office and flew back on May 26th to pull papers. The papers were pulled on the 26th. The signatures were obtained and returned the very next day. That's another requirement, is to obtain signatures. So you obviously cannot do that in quarantine. And those signatures were returned on the 27th. And she flew back shortly after that. Those were the dates. I see a third question as well. Did her children, family comply with the quarantine when they returned to Hawaii?
Yes.
So Ms. Ford has indicated that yes, you want to talk about that, what that was like for them, or?
Sure. So My children who both attend Hawaii Public Schools, the Hawaii Department of Education initially announced the first day to return back to school was going to be on August 4th. So on Monday, July the 20th, my two children by themselves boarded a flight from California, returning back to Honolulu. It was exactly 15 days prior to the announced first day of school that they would quarantine, which they did. It was then further announced by the DOE, the Department of Ed, that the start date would be later. So it was actually this week, 2 weeks later than the initial date. So I've been separated from my children since July the 20th.
And my understanding is if the remote education continues, your children may actually fly back to be with you.
We'll do whatever it takes to reunite, but at this point in time, the distance learning is only confirmed for the next 4 weeks. And essentially, if we flew them back, they would have to re-quarantine.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, when did the agents from the AG's office contact you about quarantine? Yes, we do have those records. The agent first contacted Ms. Ford on June 19th.
Yes.
So Juneteenth Day. And she was contacted by a special agent with the State of Hawaii Attorney General's office. And he informed her that she had violated the governor's quarantine order, and that she, obviously informed him that she was no longer in Hawaii, she's in California. And then he proceeded to ask her to fly back to Hawaii so that they could arrest her. She was obviously very taken aback by this. She did seek legal representation, contacted my office. I reached out to the special agent because I frankly was shocked that they would insist on physically arresting her. As a former prosecutor, I've worked both as a deputy district attorney at the county level as well as an assistant U.S. attorney on the federal level. And I've never really seen those sort of heavy-handed tactics used with minor offenses on nonviolent people with no criminal history. So when I contacted the special agent, I was surprised that they were insisting on this procedure. We did offer to accept service for a citation. I was then contacted by a deputy attorney general on July 10th with the attorney general's office, and again renewed our offer to accept service for a citation in lieu of physically arresting Ms. Ford and taking her to jail, and they did not accept that offer. Says, where are you in California? Well, we're currently at my law office, which is located in Newport Beach, California. That is where we are physically located at the moment. Are there any other questions? Our request is really simple. We wanted to go public today, so one, the public is aware of the legal position Ms. Ford is in, as well as why she has not been back in Hawaii to campaign, whether it is through safe events that are permitted with social distancing, or to virtually campaign from within the state of Hawaii. But also it's to seek and ask that the Attorney General's office back off their demand of arresting Ms. Ford and take away this threat of arrest, so that way she can return to her home state and she can be with her children and campaign for office. And that is really our hope today, is that the Attorney General's office will reconsider their position and treat law-abiding, tax-paying citizens with the respect and dignity they deserve, and not treating them as criminals. This is a challenging time for everyone. It's a challenging time for families and for all citizens, and there's really no need to escalate the situation and make it worse by throwing people in jail who really shouldn't be in jail. Question here is, are you willing to abide by the quarantine order when and if you return?
Absolutely.
Yes, and Ms. Ford's issue is not that she didn't want to abide by the quarantine. There was no reasonable way in which she could abide. By the time she made the decision to run for office and the deadline to pull papers, there was not 14 days for her to quarantine. So she did what she thought was best, which was just to fly in and out quickly, pull her papers, file it, and leave, and not, and not spend any more time there than necessary, and in violation of the quarantine order. And yeah, she's absolutely willing to abide by it as long as it doesn't otherwise infringe on her constitutional rights. And that is an issue that I think will still be litigated. I know the Attorney General's office for the United States, the Department of Justice, has taken an interest in the governor's quarantine order, and I think that order will continue to be litigated. And someday, I believe that order will be considered disproportionate and unconstitutional, especially when it comes to infringing on people's constitutional rights, such as Ms. Ford, to run for office, or whether residents of other states like California who want to travel to Hawaii and enjoy the beautiful state of Hawaii and their beautiful beaches. And we cannot do that without subjecting ourselves to a 14-day quarantine. And, the Constitution doesn't really permit states to discriminate against people of other states in that manner, especially when there's less restrictive ways to accomplish the objectives here by requiring people to take a test for COVID before traveling, or other means besides just draconian quarantine orders, which are destroying the economy of Hawaii, the tourism industry, and affecting people's lives. And with that, if there are there any more questions? Okay. We will conclude by thanking you all for your time today and for bringing attention to this open matter, to this important matter. Like I said, our request is simple: is that the Attorney General's office remove the threat of arrest from Ms. Ford. They can cite her, they can summons her, they can pursue whatever legal means they want. There is not a need, there's no necessity to arrest her, haul her to jail, and subject her potentially to COVID infection in jail. Jails are not safe at this time for people to go in and out. So that is our request. I hope they will reconsider. We thank you all for your time and your consideration of this matter. Thank you.
Mahalo.